Grade 12s, how are you? Hopefully this is a good thing to see. So we're going to start our digital lessons from chemical coordination and the endocrine system. This first little video is just a little bit of an introduction to the whole endocrine system. I feel like it seems like such a small section, but it really has such a large impact because this is ultimately going to really affect how you are able to do the reproductive system. And, obviously that is part of your paper 2. So we need to get cracking on with the stuff. So let's begin. So it's got a quick little introduction for you guys. So we're going to talk about the general characteristics of the endocrine system. I really just want to point out one thing is just hormones, like chemicals called hormones. And we'll go over what hormones are again, but I hope that you all remember that it's these chemical messengers that actually cause the body to respond in a very specific way. And when you respond in those very specific ways, the body's actually able to function. Please also note that this endocrine system is directly related to, in comparison with the nervous system, where the nervous system uses impulses along, nerves that causes a reaction, whereas this is moved around in the bloodstream, which is completely different. Then in B, all I really want you to have a look at is like the metabolic processes. So the idea of metabolism is just like the idea of chemical reactions. The definition itself, there is no actual definition of metabolism, and I've not really scoured the internet, but I've asked a couple of people. No one really knows what a metabolism is. So long story short, ultimately it's just all the chemical reactions within the body. Let's say, when you hit when adrenaline kicks in and your body becomes stronger and faster and you start paying more attention to the body, and we'll go over the adrenaline in quite a lot of detail. Then in C, I just want to pick up the idea of a target cell or target organ. Please remember that your hormones themselves don't randomly float around in the blood, and then let's say you want to release a whole bunch of, I don't know, glucose from your muscles, but then all of a sudden glucagon ends up in the brain. It's very specific. It's not just going to affect any and every cell. There are some hormones which are maybe less specific in what they affect, but it just means that they are still specific, but they affect a wider range of actual organs. And then in D, these are really important besides number 3. So the pituitary gland we'll go over in great amounts, and you'll see in later slides that it is literally the master gland. If you had no pituitary gland, or you could somehow cut someone's pituitary gland out of their head, you would really be affected quite badly and you would die. You cannot live without the pituitary gland. So if it gets if it gets damaged, you will really go through a lot of damage. It really regulates a lot of the stuff that happens in the body, and it's made out of 2 lobes, the anterior and the posterior. If you're looking for a 95%, you need to know the difference between anterior and posterior. Otherwise, just know that the pituitary gland exists. Also, please note that the name for the pituitary gland is very modern. So a lot of the times in older textbooks, if you guys go and read it a little bit more, you'll find out that it's also known as the hypophysis, and the spelling is in your notes. Then number 2, the thyroid gland. You'll remember that thing just over here, and we spoke about it in grade 10. And you can either get hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism. Just remind you about hyper and hypo. Hyper meaning an increase in something or too much of something, whereas hypo deals with the lack of or the deficiency of something. So if you did not have a lot of thyroxine, which is the hormone that is directly related to this, you could form anything from something called a goiter, which is the expansion of the entire thyroid, or you could end up having a very overactive metabolism, which would end up you storing fat behind your eyes and stuff, and your eyes popping out. I recommend you go and read it if you want. It's quite cool. The parathyroid gland, it's not really for matric level, it's far higher up, but it deals with the secretion of calcium. And there's another word we should maybe just go over again, the difference between secretion and excretion. So secretion itself is something that is released by the body, and it is for the body. So it has some sort of good purpose within the body. So by the body, for the body, whereas excretion is by the body, not for the body. So we're talking waste products such as urea, feces, and all that other kind of stuff. All right, then we got our adrenal glands. And if none of you know where your adrenal glands are, they are sitting nice and perky on top of your kidneys. they can actually be quite easily damaged, and if they are, your body can actually respond in very dangerous ways as well. It can either become overactive or underactive, and adrenaline is great, but in too large amounts, it's actually bad as well. Also note that during this period of time, which is extremely stressful, your adrenal glands are actually releasing a small amount of adrenaline to actually make sure that your body copes during this period as well. So that is often why a lot of people crash after very stressful events, and not crash in terms of like a car, like energy wise, for the simple fact that it's tiring to like continuously produce a large amount of energy. The effects of adrenaline and fight and flight will be dealt with a little bit later. Then number 5 is probably one of the most important, is the pancreas, and it's a big thing in matric level work. Pancreas. It's just there are special kinds of cells inside of the pancreas, so you'll need to know the structure of the pancreas in quite a lot of detail, as well as the idea that what it does and how it functions. You'll need to fully understand the idea of diabetes type 1 and type 2, and it's not necessarily easy, but it's not difficult at the same time, so you really should be fine. All right, so we're just going to talk about hormones quickly. So remember, hormones are organic chemical messengers. And if we can just remember what organic means, it means it contains a carbon backbone as well as originates from a living organism. Mostly protein in nature. Some are lipid. The steroids, which are also hormone-like in nature, a lot of them are lipid-based. But generally, hormones are protein, which means that like teaching you protein synthesis kind of goes hand in hand with this. It's produced in extremely small quantities, but this is more specifically for the endocrine gland. So we'll talk about an exocrine and an endocrine a little bit later. So to a large extent, you don't want to release a lot of a specific hormone, because if it ends up in the blood and it will be very specific to a specific hormone, you might overexcite that hormone, or that target organ, which could ultimately cause some damage. So always remember to yourself, like, these glands are very specific in what they do, and how they affect the body is very interesting. Unlike an exocrine gland, which we'll get to a little bit later. So it is transported in the blood and it goes directly for where it needs. I've put a diagram of testosterone and estrogen just to take up some extra space over here. But it acts on target organs, and target organs are stuff like your muscles, your heart, the thyroid itself, stomach. Remember when we did digestion, like the release of certain enzymes kind of comes from this whole entire situation as well. So you can either stimulate or inhibit a response. So stimulate means to cause a target organ to respond positively to what you want it to do. So you're causing it to go from this level to again that level, like you're forcing it to do a job. Whereas inhibit means that you're stopping it from doing a specific job. And a lot of the times, if you remember from the nervous system last year, you might want to stimulate a specific part of the body here, but you also want to reduce how one part of the body reacts over there. So the whole sympathetic, parasympathetic, all those kinds of vibes. It's gone. Oh, there. All right. So a target organ, by definition, is an organ that is affected by a specific hormone. So let's look at some hormones that could be hormones secreted from the pituitary gland, and they target organs. So here's some target organs. We've got the ovary, we've got the breasts, the kidneys, the adrenal cortex, bone, muscle, skin, thyroid, and testes or testicles. So we can have a look over there. We've got ACTH, GH, MSH, TSH, FSH, LH, prolactin, oxytocin, ADH. Now, if I said to you, if you want a 95%, you can go and learn which hormones are released from the anterior pituitary, whereas, and then the ones that are released from the posterior pituitary gland. I'm just going to briefly go over a couple of these now, because we are going to do it in great depth a little bit later. ADH is known as antidiuretic hormone. It is a very important word to have in your artillery to understand what the word diuretic means. And it means to pretty much urinate. So antidiuretic, or it means to conserve your water. Then you've got oxytocin and prolactin. So oxytocin, that is produced as a result of either hugging someone, so the love hormone, or is also produced when the body needs to start its contractions to actually expel the child out of the womb. Prolactin sounds very much to lactating. So it is the hormone that is produced when the child is developing to tell the mother's mammary glands that it now needs to start producing milk. Ovaries, so we've got the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These we will do in huge amounts of study when we do the what do you call that section? The reproductive system. So the follicle stimulating hormone is a hormone that is produced so that we can start producing gametes, and luteinizing hormone is a hormone that is released when the follicle has matured to a large enough extent. Luteinizing hormone comes to kick in to push that actual gamete that has been produced out. Then we got TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone. We spoke about this earlier, and thyroid stimulating hormone is ultimately going to decide whether you are going to have a fast metabolism or slow metabolism based on thyroxine that is produced, and we'll do the feedback systems for a little bit later. We have MSH, which has to do with the amount of secretion of sweat. Then we have GH, which is growth hormone. Growth hormone is also known as, I was actually reading about it now quickly, somatotrophic hormone. It is literally what causes the body to either elongate or not elongate. So you can actually find that some people, their pituitary gland just doesn't release this growth hormone, and then they're going to start producing, well, then they're going to look like dwarfs. So that is one thing that can happen, or alternatively it can be over-secreted, and then you'll end up being a pituitary giant, and then you'll suffer from something called acromegaly, which we'll deal with later. And then finally you got your adrenaline, which is being produced up here. So I don't need you to learn this. Do not learn this table, please. No, there's no need for it. You're not in a GDE school. This is just so that you have a way of actually reading between the lines. What I do recommend is we just go through the endocrine system, because this is a nice summary of everything I've said till now. So it controls the metabolic activities of the body using hormones that travel in the blood. Hormones target specific groups of cells, glands, or organs called target organs or target cells. And the body is coordinated by slow, long-lasting responses brought by hormones. That last point over there is actually the definition of the chemical coordination. So I recommend you write that down, highlight it in whatever pretty highlighter you have in your hand, and yeah, it's pretty important. Then we have the differences between an endocrine and an exocrine gland. So what you need to understand is we've constantly said up until now that everything is released directly into the blood, but this is not true. Think of skin and sweat. So sweat technically is a secretion, is maybe not of a hormone, but it is something that is released in response to whatever's happening around. So we first have the exocrine gland and the endocrine gland. So first of all, we understand that endo means inside and exo means to the outside. So endocrine to the inside, exocrine to the outside. And you can see I've put those diagrams at the bottom for you guys to actually be able to have a look at all of this stuff. So endocrine glands are ductless, which means they do not have an exit area or exit point for whatever is being produced. So when the hormone itself is produced, it is then secreted directly into the blood, and it's not released into the actual open section. So secretion is transported in the blood, and small amounts of the hormone is secreted. Because it's so specific and it's able to move through the blood, which is going to move it to the target organ very quickly, it means that we don't have to produce a lot. Whereas the exocrine glands, the glands possess ducts. Okay, so you can see at the bottom over there where those water droplets are exiting that exocrine gland, it's being released into an open cavity, whereas the endocrine glands are being released directly into the blood. So we have secretion transported down a duct into a target organ. Think about stuff like the stomach, the intestines, the gallbladder, not necessarily the liver. I'm trying to think of another one now. We'll get there later. And large amounts of secretion. So examples, enzymes are secreted. So exocrine, large amounts. Endocrine, small amounts. Endocrine in the blood. Exocrine into a target organ. Exocrine has ducts, and endocrine, it has no ducts. All right. So I'm going to end this here, and then the next time we're going to start, I want you to please go to your notes, and I'll tell you what page we're on, and I want you to highlight as we actually go along. So get your notes out and let's get ready.